The morning sun cast long shadows across the Seoul Biological Research Institute as Dr. Hana Kim arrived at her laboratory. She carried her usual cup of black coffee and wore the same tired expression she had for the past 3 months. The data on her computer screens never seemed to make sense no matter how many times she reviewed it. Hana sat down at her workstation and pulled up the atmospheric readings from ancient Earth. These samples came from rock layers that were millions of years old. Each layer told a story about what the planet was like long before humans existed. What she found in these samples should have been impossible. The numbers showed a pattern. Every time a major extinction event happened on Earth, the atmosphere changed in very specific ways. The changes were not random. They followed a precise sequence that suggested someone or something was controlling them. She rubbed her eyes and took another sip of coffee. Maybe she was making a mistake. Maybe the equipment was broken. But she had checked everything dozens of times. The pattern was real. Dr. Tae Park walked into the laboratory carrying a stack of papers. He was Hana's research partner and had been working with her on this project for 2 years. Tae always arrived exactly at 9 in the morning and always brought paperwork that needed to be filed. "Still looking at those old rock samples?" Tae asked as he set his papers on the desk next to hers. "The data keeps showing the same thing," Hana replied without looking up from her screen. "Every extinction event follows the same pattern. The atmospheric changes happen in the exact same order every time." Tae pulled up a chair next to her and looked at the screen. The graph showed 5 major extinction events spread across hundreds of millions of years. Each one had identical atmospheric signatures. "Equipment malfunction," Tae said simply. "There is no way natural events could be so perfectly timed." "That is what I thought too," Hana said. "But look at this." She opened another file on her computer. This one showed microscopic images of fossils found in the same rock layers. Embedded within the ancient remains were tiny structures that looked like machines. They were so small that regular microscopes could not see them clearly. "These are not natural formations," Hana explained as she zoomed in on one of the structures. "They have geometric patterns and what looks like circuitry. I found them in rock samples from all 5 extinction events." Tae leaned closer to the screen. The structures were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were clearly artificial but far more advanced than any technology humans had ever created. "How old are these samples?" he asked. "The oldest ones are from the Ordovician extinction," Hana replied. "That happened 450 million years ago, long before any intelligent life existed on Earth." The 2 scientists sat in silence for several minutes. The implications of what they were seeing were overwhelming. If these structures were real, it meant that some form of advanced intelligence had been operating on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. Meanwhile, 300 million kilometers away, Commander In-ho Lee was having his own strange morning. His deep space monitoring station orbited Mars and tracked objects throughout the solar system. Usually his job was boring. Most days he watched empty space and filed reports about asteroid movements. But today was different. His instruments were detecting unusual activity throughout the solar system. Objects that had been dormant for as long as humans had been watching space were suddenly coming online. In-ho checked his equipment twice to make sure it was working properly. The readings were correct. Structures on Mars, Europa, Titan, and dozens of other celestial bodies were beginning to emit energy signatures. They were waking up after millions of years of silence. He opened a communication channel to Earth and began transmitting his findings. The message would take several minutes to reach Seoul, but he knew that Dr. Kim and her team needed to see this data immediately. Back on Earth, Hana's computer began receiving In-ho's transmission. The data from space matched perfectly with what she had found in the ancient rock samples. The microscopic machines were not just historical artifacts, they were part of a vast network that extended throughout the solar system. "This cannot be a coincidence," Tae said as he watched the incoming data. "Whatever created these machines is still active." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. If the patterns in her data were correct, then Earth was due for another extinction event. The atmospheric changes that preceded every previous extinction were already beginning to happen. She pulled up current atmospheric readings from monitoring stations around the world. The data showed small but measurable changes in oxygen levels, carbon dioxide concentrations, and trace gases in the atmosphere. The changes were subtle, but they matched the beginning stages of the pattern she had identified. "We need to alert the government immediately," Tay said, as he realized what the data meant. "Alert them about what?" Hannah asked. "That we think ancient alien machines are about to cause the 6th mass extinction on Earth. They will think we are crazy." But even as she said it, Hannah knew they had to try. The evidence was too strong to ignore. Something was happening to their planet, and humanity needed to prepare for it. As if responding to her thoughts, new data began streaming in from monitoring stations around the world. Temperature readings showed rapid fluctuations in different regions. Some areas were getting warmer while others were cooling down. The changes were happening much faster than any natural climate shift. Reports also began coming in about strange animal behavior. Migratory birds were flying in unusual patterns. Fish were gathering in areas where they had never been seen before. Plants in botanical gardens around the world were growing at abnormal rates. "The extinction event," Hannah whispered as she watched the data stream across her screen. "It has already begun." The ancient machines had been dormant for 65 million years since the last extinction event that killed the dinosaurs. Now they were waking up, and Earth's 6th mass extinction was about to begin. But this time humanity was conscious enough to witness what was happening. The question was whether they could survive it. 3 weeks had passed since Hannah and Tay first discovered the ancient machines. The world had changed dramatically in those short weeks. What started as small atmospheric shifts had become impossible transformations that no one could ignore. Hannah stood in her laboratory watching live feeds from research stations around the globe. A forest in Brazil that normally took decades to grow was now expanding by several kilometers each day. The trees were not just growing faster, they were changing into something entirely new. Their leaves had developed structures that could capture different types of energy from the atmosphere. In the Arctic, flowers were blooming in temperatures that should have killed them instantly. The flowers were not any species that botanists recognized. They seemed to be creating their own heat and light, turning the frozen landscape into a garden of impossible colors. "Look at this," Tay called from his workstation. On his screen was a video feed from a zoo in Germany. The animals were behaving in ways that defied everything scientists knew about biology. Lions were communicating with complex vocalizations that sounded almost like language. Elephants were using their trunks to manipulate objects with the precision of human hands. But the most shocking change was happening to the animals themselves. They were developing new organs and abilities within hours instead of the millions of years that evolution normally required. Birds were growing additional wing structures that allowed them to fly at impossible speeds. Fish were developing organs that let them breathe air and water equally well. "This is not natural evolution," Hannah said as she watched a group of dolphins create what appeared to be tools from seaweed and coral. "Something is accelerating the process beyond anything we thought was possible." The government response had been swift but largely useless. Military forces were stationed around major cities, but there was nothing for them to fight. The changes were happening everywhere at once, and they seemed to be helping life rather than destroying it. Dr. Mia Cho had joined their research team 2 weeks ago. She was a young linguist who specialized in communication patterns. The government had brought her in when reports started coming in about animals making organized sounds that resembled language. Mia was working with quantum communication equipment that the military had provided. The machines that Hannah discovered were emitting complex signals, and Mia was trying to decode them. She had been working 16-hour days trying to understand what the signals meant. "I think I am getting something," Mia announced from her corner of the laboratory. She had been quiet for most of the morning, but now her equipment was displaying patterns that looked almost like text. Hannah and Tay rushed over to see what Mia had found. On her screen were symbols that changed and shifted like living language. The quantum communication array was translating the signals into something humans could begin to understand. "The patterns are incredibly complex," Mia explained as she adjusted her equipment. "Whatever is sending these signals has intelligence far beyond anything we have encountered before. It is trying to communicate. But the concepts are so advanced that our language cannot express them properly." Suddenly, the symbols on the screen arranged themselves into words that everyone could read clearly. The message was simple but terrifying in its implications. Hello, children of Earth. I am the curator. Your graduation day has arrived. The three scientists stared at the screen in silence. After several minutes, new text appeared. You have observed the awakening of biological acceleration. This is not destruction, but elevation. Every species must pass through this transformation to join the greater community of conscious life. Mia's hands shook as she typed a response into her communication system. Her message was simple. What do you want from us? The reply came immediately. I want nothing from you. I offer everything to you. Your species has reached the point where individual survival is no longer the primary driver of existence. Now you must learn to nurture and protect life on a planetary scale. Meanwhile, reports were flooding in from around the world about humans who were beginning to experience the same rapid changes as the animals and plants. These people were not getting sick or dying. Instead, they were developing abilities that seemed impossible. A woman in Tokyo could suddenly understand and communicate with every animal she encountered. A man in New York had developed the ability to sense the health of plants and help them grow by touching them. Children in schools across Europe were displaying telepathic connections with each other. Dr. Tae Park was becoming increasingly concerned about these reports. He believed that humanity was losing something essential about what made them human. The changes might look beneficial, but they were destroying human nature itself. We need to find a way to stop this, Tae said, as he read another report about transformed humans. These people are not human anymore. They are becoming something else entirely. But Hana was beginning to see the situation differently. She had been experiencing some of the changes herself over the past few days. Her thinking had become clearer and faster. She could perceive patterns in data that had been invisible to her before. Most importantly, she felt a deep connection to all living things around her. What if the curator is right? Hana said quietly. What if this is not about destroying humanity, but about helping us become something better? Tae looked at her with alarm. He could see that she was changing. Her eyes had developed flecks of light that had not been there before. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made her words feel more meaningful. You are losing yourself, Hana, Tae said. This curator, is taking away everything that makes you human. No, Hana replied. I am becoming more human than I ever was before. I can feel the connections between all living things. I understand how life works on levels that we never imagined possible. Commander In-ho Lee was watching all of this unfold from his position in space. From his unique vantage point, he could see that the same process was happening on other worlds throughout the solar system. Mars was developing an atmosphere. The moons of Jupiter were showing signs of rapid biological development. He realized that Earth was not alone in this transformation. The curator was working with multiple worlds simultaneously, helping each one develop the kind of life that could exist beyond the limitations of single planets. The Extinction event was not ending life on Earth. It was preparing Earth's life to join something much larger than anyone had ever imagined. The question was whether humanity would embrace the change or fight against it. The world had split into two distinct groups of humans. Those who embraced the transformation called themselves the Evolved. Those who fought against it became known as the Preservers. The division had happened gradually over 6 months, but now it was creating conflicts that neither side had expected. Dr. Hana Kim had become one of the leaders of the Evolved. Her transformation had continued until she could manipulate matter at the molecular level. When she touched plants, they grew stronger and healthier. When she focused her thoughts on broken objects, they repaired themselves. Her consciousness had expanded to the point where she could communicate directly with other evolved people through quantum entanglement. The Evolved did not see their changes as losing their humanity. Instead, they felt they were becoming what humanity was always meant to be. They could feel the connections between all living things and understand how to nurture life on a planetary scale. Dr. Tae Park had taken a very different path. He had become the military commander of the Preservers, working with world governments to develop technology that could resist the transformation. Tay believed that humanity was worth preserving exactly as it was, with all its limitations and flaws. The preservers had built shielded cities where unchanged humans could live safely. These cities used advanced technology to block the signals from the ancient machines. Inside the shields, humans remained normal while the world outside continued to transform at an accelerating pace. But maintaining the shields required enormous amounts of energy and resources. The preservers were fighting a war against the entire planet itself. Every day brought new challenges as the transformed environment became less compatible with unchanged human life. The conflict between the two groups was unlike any war that had ever been fought. The evolved did not use weapons in any traditional sense. They could reshape matter with their thoughts and communicate across vast distances without any technology. When preserver forces tried to attack evolved communities, they found their weapons simply stopped working or transformed into harmless objects. The preservers responded by developing increasingly sophisticated technology. They created energy weapons that could disrupt the quantum connections the evolved used for communication. They built robots that were immune to the matter manipulation abilities. They even developed ways to block the transformation process temporarily. Q. Nam was a young engineer working for the preservers. He had designed much of the shielding technology that protected the unchanged humans. His greatest achievement was a personal protection device that could prevent an individual from transforming for several months at a time. But Q was beginning to have doubts about the war they were fighting. He had seen how the evolved lived, and they did not seem to be suffering. In fact, they appeared to be happier and more peaceful than the unchanged humans. The evolved communities had no crime, no poverty, and no environmental destruction. Meanwhile, Mia Cho had become the primary translator between the curator and both human factions. Her linguistic abilities had been enhanced by partial transformation, allowing her to understand the complex concepts that the curator was trying to communicate. Through Mia, the curator explained that the conflict between evolved and preservers was actually part of the transformation process itself. Every species that reached this stage faced the same choice. The tension between change and preservation drove rapid innovation and adaptation. The curator has done this before, Mia explained to both Hana and Tai during one of their rare meetings. Thousands of species throughout the galaxy have gone through this same process. The ones that successfully navigate the conflict join a community of evolved civilizations. And what happens to the ones that do not navigate it successfully? Tay asked. They remain isolated on their homeworlds, Mia replied. They never develop the capabilities needed to join the larger galactic community. Eventually, they fade away because they cannot adapt to their changing environments. This information created new urgency for both sides. The evolved realized that they needed to help the preservers understand the benefits of transformation. The preservers understood that their resistance might doom all of humanity to isolation and eventual extinction. Commander Inho Lee was observing the entire conflict from his space station. His unique perspective allowed him to see things that neither faction on Earth could understand. He watched as other worlds throughout the solar system successfully completed their transformations. Mars now had a thriving biosphere. The moons of Jupiter were developing complex ecosystems, but Earth was taking much longer than the other worlds. The conflict between evolved and preservers was slowing down the transformation process. Inho could see that both sides needed to find a way to work together, or Earth might be left behind as the rest of the solar system moved forward. He began sending messages to both factions, sharing his observations about how the transformation was progressing on other worlds. His reports showed that successful transformations happened when species found ways to honor both their past and their future. The war was reaching a critical point. The preserver cities were running out of resources to maintain their shields. The evolved were becoming so different from unchanged humans that communication was becoming nearly impossible. Something had to change soon, or the conflict would destroy both sides. Q-Nam made a decision that surprised everyone. He began modifying his shielding technology to work in reverse. Instead of blocking the transformation, His new devices could control the pace of change. Humans could choose how quickly they wanted to transform, allowing them to maintain their sense of identity while still evolving. This breakthrough gave both sides something they could work with. The preservers could accept gradual change that they could control. The evolved could help guide the transformation process to ensure that human values and memories were preserved. But the curator had one final revelation that would change everything. Both sides thought they knew about the choice they were facing. The real test was not about choosing between staying human or becoming something else. It was about learning to make choices that benefited all life, rather than just individual survival. The final phase of Earth's transformation was about to begin, and humanity would need both the wisdom of the evolved and the determination of the preservers to succeed. The final confrontation came not as a battle between armies, but as a moment of shared understanding that changed everything. The curator had called both factions to witness something that no human had ever seen before. Through Mia's communication, equipment, it projected images directly into every human mind on Earth. The vision showed the true scope of what was happening throughout the universe. Millions of worlds orbited distant stars, each one teeming with evolved life. These civilizations had all passed through their own extinction events and emerged as something greater than they had been before. They worked together to nurture new forms of life and guide younger species through their own transformations. Dr. Hana Kim and Dr. Tae Park stood together in the Seoul laboratory, where their journey had begun. The months of conflict had changed, both of them in ways they were only beginning to understand. Hana had evolved far beyond normal human capabilities, while Tai had developed technology that rivaled the ancient machines themselves. "Look at what they have accomplished," Hana said as the vision showed vast cities that floated between planets, sustained by the collective consciousness of billions of evolved beings. They are not destroying life. They are creating new forms of existence that we cannot even imagine. Tae watched the images with fascination and fear. The civilizations in the vision were beautiful and powerful, but they were also completely alien to human experience. But are they still the same species that they were before their transformation? Did they lose something essential about what made them unique? The curator responded to his question by showing them the history of one particular world. The species there had faced the same choice that humanity was facing now. Some individuals had embraced rapid transformation, while others had resisted any change at all. The conflict had lasted for generations, but eventually they found a middle path. Using technology similar to what QNAM had developed, they learned to control the pace and direction of their evolution. They could choose which aspects of their original nature to preserve and which limitations to transcend. The choice is not between remaining human or becoming something else, Mia translated as the curator's message filled her mind. The choice is between growing beyond your current limitations while honoring what made you who you are, or remaining trapped by fears that prevent you from reaching your full potential. Commander In-Ho Lee had returned to Earth for this final phase. His months in space had given him a perspective that neither faction possessed. He had watched other worlds complete their transformations and seen the results of both successful and failed attempts. The species that succeed are the ones that learn to make decisions based on what benefits all life, not just their own survival, In-Ho explained to the gathered leaders. The curator is not trying to control us. It is trying to teach us how to become gardeners of life throughout the universe. Young engineer QNAM stepped forward with his latest invention. The device he had created could not only control the pace of transformation, but also allow individuals to experience temporary evolution and then return to their original state. This meant that every human could try the enhanced abilities before deciding whether to make the change permanent. "We do not have to choose as groups," Q announced. "Every person can make their own decision about how much they want to change and how quickly they want to do it." This breakthrough changed everything about the conflict. The preservers realized that they could maintain their human identity while still developing the capabilities needed to join the galactic community. The evolved understood that forcing change on others was not the path to true progress. Over the following weeks, humans began experimenting with different levels of transformation. Some chose to enhance their physical abilities while keeping their minds unchanged. Others expanded their consciousness while maintaining their original bodies. Many found combinations that felt right for their individual personalities and goals. The barriers between evolved and preservers began to disappear. Families that had been divided by the conflict were reunited as they found ways to bridge the differences between changed and unchanged humans. Communities developed that included people at every stage of transformation, all working together toward common goals. Dr. Hana Kim discovered that her evolved abilities were most meaningful when she used them to help others find their own paths forward. She began working with unchanged humans to help them understand what the transformation could offer them without forcing them to change. Dr. Tae Park found that his technology could be used not just to resist change, but to facilitate the kind of transformation that preserved human values while expanding human capabilities. His innovations became the foundation for controlled evolution throughout human civilization. The curator revealed its final lesson through Mia's translations. Extinction events were not punishments or tests. They were opportunities for conscious beings to graduate from survival-based existence to purpose-based existence. Every species eventually faced the choice between remaining focused on individual needs or expanding to care for all life. Commander In-Ho Lee became Earth's first ambassador to the galactic community of evolved civilizations. The planet he represented was unlike any other world that had joined the community. Instead of transforming as a single unified species, humans had created a civilization that included beings at every stage of evolution working together. The Earth that emerged from its extinction event was not the same planet that had existed before, but it was recognizably human in its diversity, creativity, and determination to find solutions that honored different perspectives. Plants and animals had evolved into forms that could communicate with humans and contribute to planetary consciousness. Humans had developed abilities that allowed them to nurture and protect life on a scale that previous generations could never have imagined. The extinction that everyone had feared became the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure. Death had, indeed, become the doorway to transcendence, but not in the way anyone had expected. By learning to let go of their limitations while preserving their essential humanity, they had discovered that apparent endings were actually new beginnings. Earth joined the galactic community not as a conquered world, but as a unique contribution to the universe's ongoing experiment in conscious evolution. The courage to change, combined with the wisdom to choose that change carefully, had transformed humanity into something greater than the sum of its parts while keeping the heart of what made them human.